Hi, welcome to our channel. This video is about our voyage taking Agape from Annapolis, Maryland, USA to St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm John, and this is Betsy. After spending the summer commissioning, christening, and shaking down our boat on the Chesapeake Bay, using it whenever we could and letting it out for charter, we decided to move Agape to St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands and put it into charter with CYOA Yacht Charters. We could have hired a delivery crew to sail it down, but we decided we wanted the experience of the Blue Water Passage. Part of owning our own boat instead of chartering was to gain experience on the boat we wanted to take cruising and improve our knowledge and seamanship with offshore passages. Like Captain Ron says,
wait a minute, we don't even know if this thing is safe or not.
Well, best way to find out is to get her out on the ocean, Kitty. If anything's gonna happen, it's gonna happen out there.
Our insurance required us to take on an experienced captain for a blue water passage from Annapolis to St. Thomas. The best route takes you 300 to 400 miles offshore. I highly recommend an experienced person or two on board when undertaking your first blue water passage. It was much less stressful with experience on board. We also hired an experienced first mate chosen by the captain. We worked with our dealer to get all the repairs complete that were on our punch list. These were mostly handled under warranty, but we did have a couple wear and tear items also. The most serious repair we had was to find and fix a leak on our diesel tank. We also added a water maker so that our boat would be self-sufficient while on charter in the islands. We negotiated 4 weeks of vacation so we would not feel pushed by a schedule, provisioned the boat, added some safety equipment. We added an offshore capable EPIRB device. We had tethers for all the life vests. Jack lines were run to the front of the boat and the mast. And we added personal devices to the on-watch life vest. This included the AIS transponder that activated when the life vest activated so that we could find a man overboard. Also, the crew watcher system that alarmed on a phone or tablet whenever it hit the water. This one watch vest was worn by whoever had the watch. It gave us peace of mind, especially in rough weather or at night. 10 days before the proposed November 4th departure, this was the forecast from Predict Wind. It was a pretty good forecast with some adverse winds at the start, but nothing that would be uncomfortable or unsafe. So we set off with Captain Pat and Bob. We planned to leave on the 4th, but we continued to watch the weather. We did not want to get caught by a North Atlantic storm system. We planned to leave on November 4th, and we're checking weather windows on Predict Wind and Windy. All was well until about November 1st, when stronger winds started to show on the forecast. This was our forecast on November 1st. Departure on November 3rd or 4th was still looking good, although it was looking like sooner was better. When we looked on November 2nd, it was decided that departure on the 3rd was the best bet. We might possibly get caught by winds of 20 to 25 knots about 4 days out, but we felt like it was still safe. We left Annapolis at about 1400 hours so that we'd arrive at the mouth of the Chesapeake in daylight hours. This is recommended because the shipping traffic is pretty heavy at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay. Daylight makes it easier to navigate around the larger vessels. Our trip started well, cool but clear, good visibility, wind would be light and from the south, so we planned to motor the way down the Chesapeake. Getting ready to start first overnight passage of Agape, heading down the Chesapeake Bay at about 8 knots. Pretty quiet out here tonight. Hopefully it'll stay that way. We did have some large ship traffic to avoid during the night. The most exciting was getting hailed around midnight from a cruise ship that needed us to get out of their way. We were near the mouth of the Rappahannock River in an area called the Rappahannock Shoals. Deeper draft vessels have to use the Rappahannock Shoal Channel, which is only a tenth of a mile wide. The cruise ship was maneuvering to enter the channel, heading down bay, and we were in the way. We altered course very quickly. At the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, several vessels we encountered were U.S. Navy that require you to give them more sea room for security reasons. They also like to talk with you on the VHF to understand your intentions. They were very nice, but they did not use the AIS system at all. Another reason to not transit this area at night. We even saw a Navy helicopter towing a boat. Not sure what that was all about. We topped off our fuel tank and head out into the Atlantic, going across the top of the Transbay Tunnel. Our goal was to get across the Gulf Stream as quickly as possible before the wind turned and started to make the Gulf Stream very rough. North winds build the Gulf Stream into a sea state that's very uncomfortable. We motored out to sea on one engine and to get east across the Gulf at the closest point. We were sailing about 5 to 6 knots with the wind about 35 degrees off the port bow and running one engine at 2,000 RPMs. By noon on the 5th, we were in the Gulf Stream, and with our stop for fuel, we had made about 95 miles that day. By the evening of the November 5th, we were across the Gulf Stream and were able to shut down the engine and set sail on course for St. Thomas on a nice beam reach, making as much easterly as we could and still keep the apparent wind at about 50 degrees on port tack. Winds were about 15 to 20 knots from about 20 degrees northeast. All was going according to plan. At noon on November 6th, we were well across the Gulf Stream, and it made about 140 miles since noon on the 5th. We were using Predict Wind with our Iridium Go to pull weather updates down about every 8 hours. On November 6th, our updates started to change for the worse. Winds which were now predicted to build to about 20 to 30 knots from the northeast, and waves would be 2 to 3 meters. We had plenty of time to get ready. As the wind went past 20 knots and night fell, we decided to drop the main, since someone had to go to the mast to reef the main to the reef points 2 and 3. We decided that was not safe in these sea states. We sailed under Reef Genoa and kept the main sheet topping lift tensioned as a running backstay. This gave us enough power so that the person on watch could adjust the Genoa very easily with a furling line and sheet without leaving the helm to keep the boat under control, as we were starting to get some larger waves to surf down. We were able to keep our boat speed about 4 to 6 knots going up and down the waves, and we made another 115 miles by noon on the 7th of November. The only problem we were contending with, besides the wind and sea state, was Betsy had gotten seasick the second day out, so we were down to 3 watchkeepers. The wind and sea directions meant the best course we could steer was about 160 to 180 degrees south-southeast, rather than our preferred course, which was about 135 degrees southeast. It was a little rough, but we were making good speed and the boat was performing well. With the sea getting as rough as it was, we only made 105 miles by noon on the 8th. We thought that we would have clear sailing weather for the rest of the trip, but our weather update told us that we would have about a 12-hour break. We would have another storm with winds predicted to be 30 to 40 knots and seas 3 to 4 meters high. And the winds were still coming from 10 to 20 degrees north-northeast. This storm gave us some problems. Bob took a pretty bad fall while moving around the salon. He was having a hard time breathing, and everyone was concerned. By this time, we were about halfway between the Bahamas and Bermuda, about 350 nautical miles from land in a storm at night. We got on the satellite phone with the Coast Guard to apprise them of our situation and see what our options were. Our options were effectively take care of Bob the best that we could. With the weather and sea state trying to transfer him to a ship would be very dangerous. The Coast Guard kept in touch by email, and we had a passing ship ask us if we needed help the next day. Bob was feeling a little better by then, so we said we were okay. When Bob went down, Betsy was still weak from seasickness. So it was 2 watchstanders, myself and Pat. We did 2 hours on and 2 hours off because of how intense it was at the helm. We did it, but it was not that pleasant. Our Raymarine auto helm performed flawlessly the whole time, but you still needed to be alert for other ships and ready to take the helm if the auto helm lost control. This was the low point of the trip for me. I was still worried about Bob because he was in quite a bit of pain, and Betsy was still not 100%, and boy, was I tired. We did manage to make another 135 miles by noon on the 9th, even with the 3 to 4 meter seas. The other problem that we had was right as the second storm was dying down, it took one last shot at us. We got an extra large wave that broke over to the back of the boat, over the top of the dinghy, and into the cockpit. We had about a foot of water in the cockpit. Luckily, the salon slider was closed, so no water in the boat, and the cockpit drained quickly. But it filled the dinghy with water and snapped the front bridle strap, so we were effectively dragging the front of the dinghy, and it was hanging on by the stern strap to the davit. So I found myself and my life vest tethered to the rear rail, trying to get the dinghy secured, all in 3 to 4 meter seas. Pat and I accomplished it and secured the dinghy with a series of lines to any hard part on the dinghy that we could reach with a boat hook. We were glad we had taken the motor off the dinghy before the passage, but we should have rigged it better. It was now November 10th, and we were 6 days and about 700 miles into our passage. We had made 170 miles since noon on the 9th, and we were about halfway to our destination and about midpoint between Bahamas and Bermuda. The wind came down to about 15 to 20 knots, and seas were 2 to 3 meters and more organized, so we were able to turn to more of a beam reach. We put the auto helm in wind vane mode at 50 degrees apparent. With the main and Genoa both on the first reef point, we had our best mileage day of the trip. It was still much rougher than we wanted, but we were making some miles. We were still not on a direct course for St. Thomas, but we were able to get to within about 10 degrees of the course we desired. We were able to sail about 220 miles since noon on the 10th, which is over 9 knots average boat speed. This point of sail is where catamarans really shine. Bob was still laid up in the salon, but Betsy was on the mend, and we were back to a 3-person watch. Some sleep finally. November 11th and 12th were really beautiful sailing days. Winds continued to come down below 15 knots and seas were less than a meter. Winds were more easterly. With our big mileage day, we had made enough easting that as the trade started to fill in, we could still point to St. Thomas. We had made another 125 miles by noon on the 12th, slower but much smoother. November 13th, we got into a little bit of a light wind area. At this point, we started to have a problem with our 12-volt system. Every once in a while, the whole 12-volt system would just turn off and then turn back on after 5 to 10 seconds. This was a real problem since this took out everything: instruments, auto helm, navigation, AIS, VHF, everything needed to sail the boat. We knew we had a loose connection somewhere, but where? I worked with a fleet manager at CYOA by text on the Iridium Go to diagnose the problem. He suggested to start on the negative side of the system and check all the grounds and panel connections. I didn't find a loose connection, but during the process, the problem went away. If it came back, we were going to have to dig into the hot side of the system. We arrived in St. Thomas on the morning of the 15th, just a couple hours short of a 12-day passage. We had gone a little over 1,600 miles due to our detour to the west for several days. This is an estimate because when we lost the power, we lost the track we were saving on the chart plotter. Average boat speed on the trip was about 5.7 knots. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you did. You can also click on the Facebook link and connect with us that way. Our next video will be cruising around the islands and bays of the U.S. Virgin Islands. I hope you'll join us again.